with Kathy DeNicolo. And Kathy has presented at various Italian American literati events at Casa Italia. And we're very proud to know her. And she is an educator who focuses on young people and who is dedicated to the idea of literacy in her works. And we're going to start off maybe with a little bit of biography. Kathy, where do your Italian roots extend to?
Well, my parents were both born in Italy. My mother came to America when she was 4 years old with brothers and sisters and her mom. My father was born in Italy as well. He came to America when he was 9 years old. So I myself, just as an afterthought, I never went to Italy until I was about 20 years old. And one of the things that surprised me the first time I went to Italy was the idea that my grandparents, especially my grandparents and my parents, kept this whole image of Italy alive, told me about that country. It made me love that country of my once removed heritage, being an Italian American. And I thought how strong that feeling came from their storytelling. Through their stories, I came to love their country and my country.
Where were they from and where did they end up settling?
My parents were both from Southern Italy. My grandfather was, I think he had some connection to Northern Italy. That was never really clear to me. There was some issue there. My grandmother was from Southern Italy and the region around Bari, which when a few weeks ago on the espresso, Cafe Espresso Online, actually one of the presenters, Dominic, I believe, talked a little bit about how he was searching the roots of different families. And for a minute there, I thought we might be cousins, but as it turned out, we weren't. And it was kind of a cute story. But my family came from there. My grandfather and grandmother settled in the Chicago area. And came through New York, then to Chicago. My grandfather, I remember saying, we went to Chicago because I knew that we could get jobs. My father's family actually settled in Indiana, and their ticket to the job market was to work in the steel mills, and that's what they did. But so it was a situation where this idea of coming to America, you know, the American dream, and the promises that it was supposed to fill for us was laid in that way. That was the framework. And it's something that was very strong in my belief, this idea that we came to America, but there were certain viewpoints. The idea of faith, I called it the four F's here: faith, family, food, finances. It seemed that a lot of our discussions and a lot of discussions like that in other people's family, you know, it was very Christian oriented. In family life, we met with immediate family and extended family. And of course, there was always enough food and always good food. A friend of mine said, Kathy, because you're Italian, it kind of is required that you're a good cook. I said, well, you know, the thing of it is when you have a lot of people over at your house, it sort of comes with the territory. So there was always good food, and really there was always this idea of finances. You had to make ends meet. You had to move ahead. And in my family, the ticket to moving ahead was education. You had to get an education. And that was very much a basic foundation in my family. And it was really something that I believed in as well.
Kathy,
Because
tell us a little bit more. When was this? Were there books in the house?
oh,
Did you? What kind of education did your parents and grandparents have? Because I don't believe it's true that education was the highest priority in the early years. It eventually Italian Americans woke up to higher education. It might have been in the 1970s or 1980s that Italian Americans began going to college at an average rate in the United States. But comment on that, please.
First off, what year did my grandfather come to America? Probably around 1920. That's when he first came. And what he did is he raised enough money to bring his family over. And then in about 1927, 7 years later, he brought his family. He would go back to Italy every year. My grandfather actually had gone to advanced schooling. He made it very clear that school was important, and he had, I don't know that he had what you would call a college education, but he had an education of probably because he came from a wealthier family somewhere in the north. I don't really know where. Mm-hmm. And when he came to America, and with my grandmother, then about 7 years later, they both, my grandmother and my grandfather, both respected education very much. And so we're talking about 1927, 28, when they came here. And my mother finished high school, spoke fluent Italian. She went to Italian school. My father finished high school, and then he went into the service, military service, and they put him through school. They wanted him to stay in the service so that he could get college education, but he gave up on the service. And so he had some training as a mechanic, and that's how he made his livelihood. But I don't know if it's true of other families, but it was always true in mine that to move ahead, you had to have a good education. And you may have heard me say before in other talks throughout the literati and in some of the presentations that I've got given on radio and on television, I was required to do that schoolwork before anything else, before I could even ask if I could go somewhere. I had to have that education done. I had to have all my chores done. So a little different than now, I think.
Training.
Does that answer you, Dominic?
Yeah, and so where did you go to school, and where did you grow up, in fact? Did you grow up in Chicago?
I grew up on the west side of Chicago, in the Austin area. And I went to a parochial grammar school. St. Thomas was the name of that. I went to parochial high school, and that's no longer there. It was Siena High School. And then I went to DePaul University. And initially I got an education degree, and then I got certifications in a number of different areas. Got a communication specialist degree. guidance and counseling master's degree. And then as time went on, I got certification in management and supervision. And so I really like to say I was on all sides of the table in education, being a student, being the teacher, being the principal, and then later being the college instructor, adjunct faculty. So I took to heart, as you can see, that idea that for me, it required that I got a good education. So, but actually, you know, Dominic, when I went to Puglia in 2014, that was a time where my, what you might call my personal background and my professional background really overlapped. And I could see what the stories were that my grandparents and parents and the Italian community that surrounded us, what they were holding on to in their heritage and what they loved so dearly. And there were hard prices to pay sometime, high prices to pay for the idea of living the dream in America. And some of them became pretty successful, but always in their heart, that was that little longing. Was it worth it? Kind of an idea. But anyway, when I went there in 2014, I saw just little snapshots in my mind of what my grandparents had been trying to get across about their country, etc. And in my professional training, I began to see that this heritage, these values, these core values, if you want to use that term, they're probably more important to be communicated now, and more than ever. And so I began thinking very seriously about a dream I had, and something that I always thought I was going to do. Got interrupted here and there, but I always thought I was going to write. I always thought I was going to be a writer one day. And
did you do any writing before you retired?
you know, I would do practical writing for my job, Dominic. If I was selling something for student council, then I would make little skits to promote whatever. And they were fun for me, and it was fun for the kids. If I wanted to motivate students, we would do a newspaper. So I would kick off those activities. So I used writing in that professional way. At one time, still while I was teaching, I had written a short piece, a comic book, given it to some company, you know, trying to get it produced. And I'll tell you, Dominic, when I look back at this, I think, oh my. What I did was they accepted the piece, and I was supposed to go to New York and talk to them about it, but that was right over spring break. And I gave up that opportunity, just dropped it. And by the time I was ready to pursue it, it was long gone. And so I had episodes of writing as needed, so to speak. And but when I came back from that trip, maybe as a legacy, not to me, but a legacy of all the people that had come before me, I thought, well, I'm going to start writing, and I'm going to talk about some of these important values, some of these best practices professionally, of how to communicate with each other, and maybe I can do some good. And that's what I did. And so it became a situation where I wanted to get people talking about I wanted to get people talking about things in a different way. I was not pleased with some of the discussions that I was hearing on the streets. I wasn't pleased with the news. And so I began to write some things that would generate different conversations. And in generating different conversations, have people start thinking about not just young people, but families. And to get the most bang for the buck, so to speak, what I did was I tried to organize the writing so that it aligned with curriculum standards. And so that families talking about my book, talking about these activities, would have an enriching view, a wider view of the things that they were studying in school. So a lot of things went into the production of the book, of the books, really.
Yeah, can you summarize your publications? You have 3 or 4 major ones?
I have, well, I have 3 books, and then when the pandemic hit, you know, go back to that, we were all scrambling, and the children were out of school. There were requests from professional organizations that anybody who could help with lessons, help with instruction, please do so. And so I developed virtual lessons so that parents could work with their children who knew how long we were going to be out of school at that time. Now, the library associations and some of the book clubs have developed, by that I mean organizations like Society of Children Book Writers and Illustrators, and educational organizations have developed this kind of thing to help parents put lessons together. And that was my 4th unofficial, official, whatever you want to call it, virtual lessons. But Connected was my first book. And this was the story of, of a family coming to America and the struggles that they face. But it was told really from the parent's point of view, and also from as reflected, as mirrored in the child's eyes. And this starts out where, I'll read you the back of it. Living the dream, a lifelong mission. Grandma battles for her dream yet again, and who'll stand by her side? Could it be Vincent, her mild-mannered 8th grade grandson? Together, they assume the mission of living the dream and the personal journeys attached. What started in Italy and moved to America is tested by the next generation. A simple plot where a young boy runs to his grandmother to help on a school assignment turns into a much more complicated story. Does he get the powerful, life-changing lessons of another time? Can he unravel a mystery? And who is he? Where is the moral compass of his life? What does it take to walk down life's road? One thing's for sure, Grandma's not going to take him down easy street for the answers. Will she be able to rally her life forces? Can she bridge the generation gap between history and time? Who has the real power to keep the dreams alive? So it starts out where the boy has a school assignment in Connected, and his assignment is to tell about the immigrant experience. And then Grandma reflects on this. And then from this, there are parallels drawn between current times and past times, and some of the issues that, universal issues that we have to keep proving over and over again.
That's become popular.
Pardon me?
That's become popular in schools. 2 or 3 of my grandchildren had that kind of assignment. But, you know, when I was going to school in the 1950s, it wasn't a popular assignment. They never asked. They didn't care. They wanted us to be American.
Mhm.
Well,
But
anyhow,
anyway, the and I want to talk about that a little bit because that was another byproduct of one of the values that I wanted to get across. And in now, you know, multiculturalism, looking at different cultures is a very popular topic in curriculum in American in schools. And I don't know about maybe Maria could tell us. Maybe it's a popular culture in international schools as well. But cultures are important, and so I believe that I had wonderful ties to the Italian American community. And I really I had strong bonds with them. And I wanted to pass some of those bonds forward. I think it was last week that somebody was talking about dads and daughters. And they were talking about
yeah.
Italian customs in regard to death of all things. And, that's a pretty universal bond that we all have. But I could so associate with a lot of the topics that were being brought up. And one of them, I remember that as a sign of respect when we'd have a major dinner or milestone event like a wedding or a baptism, something like this, there was always a seat left empty. I don't know if other people do this, but this was a custom that we had in respect to the cultures of our forefathers. And so it was a very strong bond with me. And what I tried to do is carry that bond and form bridges, because I thought it was important to form bridges, the best of what was my culture and the best of other cultures. And this is where I tried to enhance my circle of communication by what I wanted to get across, that type of literacy where it started to have deeper conversations. I talked quite often about, I'm going to just hold this up. You could see this. It's called C8. And it's about important conversations that we have. Now, all of the books that I've written, the website, the talks that I've given surround these 8 points, because I think that they're pretty basic points in terms of communicating with people and in terms of being a real person, being attached to your community, etc. So those are some of the ideas that I tried to get across in an ever increasing circle. Every time I did something, I tried to bring in more communication. I tried to tap into different markets. So anyway, when I had finished the comeback, and then subsequently when I took the comeback and developed virtual lessons online, if you go to my website and you look in the corner of the first page, you'll see a menu. And underneath Kathy's books, if you look at the directory, it will have virtual lessons that a family can sit down and read together at the table. You asked Dominic if we ever read in my house. We always read. My parents were always reading. My grandparents were always telling stories, singing songs, singing operas. Italian television wasn't something that was really a reality when I was growing up, but they read in both English and Italian. And it was something that I passed on to my children and grandchildren. When we sat down to eat, we read. When we were driving in a car, there was something to read. There was a read aloud. And I'm very big on the read aloud idea in my books. I encourage it all the time because I think it gets insight into the characters and their motivations, an indirect way to learn things. Anyway, that was pretty successful with some people and in the Italian and American community, that because although I spoke about Italy, the points were true of other cultures. There was the diversity of other groups having the same problems. We were all in this together, this common set of problem solving. Anyway, a lot of people then said, will you tell me how to do this? How do I do this? Where do I start? I want to do the same thing. I wanted to talk about my heritage. And again, I was trying to expand my circle of communication, expand my markets for communication. So I wrote Sidekick. And this was a companion piece to some of these important conversation points, talking points, takeaways from the C8 notion. And then, I don't know if you can see this. I hope you can. Does that come out at all?
Yeah, how to use Sidekick.
Okay, good. No, that won't work. All right. So in using Sidekick, I actually, because people wanted to know, well, how can I do this? And so I actually wrote down, gave some suggestions to how young people, how parents, how grandparents, teachers could use it, how the community could read and use a book like this. And then an actual lesson of famous lines. I talked, when I gave a literati once, I talked about famous lines. And I used little puppies and dogs because I wanted to expand my market. I did not want it to be solely Italian culture, but bridges to other cultures. And this was another way to find, to talk about this in kind of a more expansive way. And so I had famous lines, famous proverbs. I have famous lines from the book Connected, spoken, and they were kickoff points for deeper conversations, because today's world is so complicated. So anything that we can do to talk to our children, read aloud to our children, read together, gives our young people and gives all of us really raised consciousness in what people are facing, gives us a good springboard and in a safe environment to start thinking about these things. So when they're in different situations, they're not taken on by surprise. Last book, this is my, this is the newest book. And this book, again, expanding conversations. This book is written in a little different style, so that young people and popular culture, you see this style used very much now, almost the idea of a comic book in terms of the memes, the characters that are used. And the idea of this book is, I thought, this world needs a little help. And maybe I can help save the planet. And I'm looking for other people to help save the planet as well. And so when you open the book, you find out that as you look at it, the way that it's written, I do see questions coming up on the screen. I can't really see all that now. So can I just take questions like at the end? Is that all right, Don?
Yeah, well, there's just an informational one that gives your website address.
Okay. All right. So, I tried to make this relate to people in the use of memes and the use of a lot of illustration. It's called a graphic novel style. At one point, graphic novels were thought to be dumb downing language. Research is showing that use of graphic novels is actually motivating and raising levels of proficiency in language. So it's a motivational way for young people, for it's a motivational way too, in the style of the times. So I also wanted to talk about some serious topics in this book but I wanted to offer a little comic relief, not in the idea of, oh God, isn't this silly, isn't this funny, but in the idea to reduce tension about some things that I thought were really hurting us all on this planet. And so of course, my popular topic is, I bet just about each one of us has one cell phone, maybe two cell phones. If we're in our house, I bet if we add our cell phones, our iPads, our computers together, really outnumbers the people in the house by a big margin, especially during this pandemic time. But, and using that cell phone, has this happened to you? So you're walking along, you take a picture and you press the wrong button, you accidentally took a picture, or you accidentally took a video, or you made what was called a butt call. You accidentally called somebody. When you sat down in a chair, you called somebody and didn't mean to call them at all. And so I began thinking, well, I bet this has happened to, I don't know if it's happened to you, Dominic, or Jason, or Kyle, but it's happened to me.
Butt calls. There's some reason why you're calling that person, and you should talk to them. I found that a couple of times it was accidental, but it turned out to be very useful and meaningful. So
Yeah.
Answer your butt calls.
And I always answer my butt calls when I make them and when I'm sure when I get them. But this is where this first story takes place. Two old friends in a shopping mall. One is called Carolina and one's called Catherine. And what they're doing is they're sitting there talking about their shopping. And I know you probably can't read this, but Carolina says, I don't know how you're going to do it, but some way you're going to find the best gift. It's going to be terrific. And she says, like, what is this that I'm going to find the best gift? Like what and when? Well, remember that time we went on vacation to Sea Island? Remember the fun, the gumbo, the parties, the bonfires? And her friend said, those were great times. Those were great memories. I do remember that. Those were awesome memories. And it was all part of your great gift of your ability to buy the best gift. And then there's a sound and they say, well, what's that sound? What's that? What is that? And then the story goes on and the cry for help. Now, that's that story goes on and talks about what happens in the aftermath of that conversation and that day of shopping. So I have several examples that I could read aloud to you today, but I think I'm going over time. So anyway, I tried in all of my writing, I tried to, in a sense, tried to pass on the dreams that I had in my personal life, the American dream, that legacy, tried to pass that on, tried to, Marshall McLuhan says the media is the message. And I tried to continually expand my types of writing and my audiences for writing. And I tried to create bonds in the Italian American community, but in other cultures who could see a reflection of themselves in this story. The diversity of our times, the idea that we're all united. I heard somebody speak a couple of weeks ago via Espresso Online, said, it used to be the melting pot, but now it's more like the salad bowl. And I could see that that analogy works as well. I talked about my heritage publications, the who, what, when, where, and why of them. They're always marked by some kind of action, some kind of behaviors that I'm asking you to read aloud, or I'm asking you in this book, I'm asking you to read aloud. And actually one of the end activities after reading it aloud is to make up awards for each other. And where I go from here, I think would be to have some kind of television or film. I don't know that I'll do that, but that would be the next media, enlarging the circle, so to speak.
Everyone with an iPhone could make a movie.
Well, and that's so true. And I thought, there is on my website, I talk about several activities that young people can do. And one of them is to make your own movie. And so I hope that maybe I will not do that. Maybe I will not have those resources available to me, but I hope that notion is planted somewhere in whoever hears the story. So I wanted to build bridges, and I wanted to take away barricades that were dividing us. And I hope that I did. I hope I've made some progress in that area.
Well, you sure have. Well, let's have some questions or comments from the Zoomers out there.
I like that, the Zoomers. I like that, Don.
We have.
I have a
Hello,
question.
Kathy.
Oh, okay, from
May
Italy,
I?
Maria Rosaria.
Oh, yes.
Oh,
Kathy,
Maria.
first of all, your story is so interesting. And I can personally identify with so many aspects of your life story and your interests. I'm a school principal here. I enjoy writing myself. Lately, I wrote a book. It's a story of a dog called Snowy and his brothers, but it's really about children. And the children in my school illustrated the book.
Oh.
That was lots of fun. I agree with you that we are experiencing a kind of crisis of values. And listening to your story, I was thinking about asking you a precise question. In this era, so critical that we are living in, where the values that we have to bring back from the past are so many, what is your position about the role of parenting and grandparenting from an educational point of view?
Well, I think they're complementary roles. I've been a parent, personally speaking, I'll start with that. I've been a parent, and I know some of the problems, and I was always frightened in the times and in the things that I was hearing. I think most parents today will probably agree with that. There's a lot out there in terms of a lot of ways that our kids can get off track, distracted, whatever. And so I think it's important to have these messages, reassuring messages, restating our values. I think that parents have so much to do, and that whatever grandparents can do to complement that role in raising their own children and even mentoring children in the community is so valuable. That's what I don't see it as a competing role at all. I think that on a more professional level, it kind of it takes on this whole idea of coaching and the idea of community and what our community values are. I mean, could be very different in looks and appearance, but that mama wants to protect her kid. And no matter what her background is, that's her main concern. And likewise, the grandparent. So I think that the values are the same. The looks may be a little different, But what's really important is very much the same. And as we get out here and tell stories about different groups of people, we realize how similar we are, how many bridges we have with other cultures. And, you know, when we tell our stories, it takes away some of the barriers as well. I hope I've answered you, Maria.
Thank you so much. Thank you, Kathy.
By the way, Maria, I'd love to see that. I'd love to see that. I saw you had like a little scrapbook thing that you talked about. I'm not on WhatsApp, but maybe you could talk to Dominic about how I could take a look at that. I'd really like to see
Oh,
that.
gladly.
I had
I
thought
will
about
do that,
sending.
Kathy.
I had thought about sending a copy of my books, really, all three of them, to the library, a library in Italy. And I was working with somebody from Casa who was going to translate for me what I had hoped these books would do, and that some of the activities that went with them. But you
Oh,
know what,
yes,
like Dominic was saying before, the kids can come up with far more imaginative. In so many ways, this is the smartest generation we've all ever had.
Yes, and you are very welcome to send the books and to come here anytime you want. I'll write down the address of my school in the chat. And
Oh, I'd love
compliments, Kathy.
Thank you.
Good luck.
Thank you, Maria. It means a lot to me.
Okay, let's go around the horn, and I always like to turn to Lou Corsino because he always has the most penetrating questions.
Dominic, Dominic, you always do that to me.
Well,
I never follow up your introduction. Kathy, I really appreciate it. One of the things that interested me, I'm a social scientist, sociologist. So when I write, I'm always in some ways tethered to data, and I find it comforting in some ways. And I always use my experiences. My experiences end up in there, but I'm always interested in the writing that you do, creative writing. That how do you not get lost in all your experiences? How do you somehow take all the experiences, your family experiences, your professional experiences, and distill them in a way that you could write about them in some sort of systematic way? I mean, I always have data that I can go back to and say, you know, that sort of guides me. But I'm always impressed with people who are more creative writers that they could put this together. Otherwise, I could see you getting easy to get lost. How do you do that?
I've thought a lot about not getting lost, but in terms of what I put in the books themselves, I don't know that you'll be able to read this, but at the beginning of each of the stories, I always give some kind of a prompt. This was Spring's message, and the prompt here was a little prologue before each story, and this one reads, "Who do you reach for when you need a lifeline? I clung to the ancient seer, my grandmother. Was it enough to survive?" And then the story starts. And I did that with each of the chapters in a finished product. I wanted that to be part of the finished product. So I had a prompt, reason for the young people to read. And on my virtual site, I put lessons, asking questions, first summarizing and then asking for reader input so that they wouldn't get lost. I think this is part of my teacher training, that aspect of it. And here in the comeback, I sent Dominic something I thought was, I had a narrator. Does she look like me? I don't know. What do you think? My narrator kicks off the purpose of the reading. And so in the first lesson, the first chapter, she says, welcome, dear readers, ready to kick off heroic missions to save the planet. So in each of the chapters, she gives kind of a purpose for reading that chapter, a key idea that we're going to be looking at. That's one way I did
Yeah, that makes sense.
Another way that I kind of evaluated the writing was that I had critique groups. I had to train myself by taking some creative writing classes. Yes, it was true that I had advanced lessons in all this, but I now wanted to look at it through a writer's eyes. So what I did is I asked other writers if did it make sense, and so sometimes they edited, and sometimes they said that massive idea did not make sense, and sometimes I agreed, and sometimes I didn't agree, because it intruded on what I wanted to put in my writing. What did I want to put forth, and the mission that I had for my writing.
Oh, it seems like you know yourself.
Yeah, right.
Put it on the page.
Yeah.
Very good. Other questions, comments?
I have a question, Dominic. This is Carla.
Yeah, Carla.
Kathy, I just think it's fascinating what you do with your work, and the graphic novels. My daughter loves them, and there's a lot of young people. I mean, she started reading them when she was younger, but even now she's in her early 20s, and I do. And in Italy, there's a big market, these serial graphic novels which come out, which are for adults. So it's there is a whole literature behind that. But I was curious, what curricular are your books? Like when a school adopts one of yours, is it just, is it social studies, or is it just literary arts, or I'm just curious how your work gets adapted into a school curriculum. So,
Well, what I would, of course, what I would have to do is approach a school, give them samples of the work, and have them have somebody in their media department evaluate the book. And a lot of the themes here that I've mentioned are part of communication skills, are part of creative arts, art classes, part of social studies classes, parts of language arts classes. And then you have particular standards like citizenship that goes through grades 5 through 12. Things like culture, different cultures, that also is an important strand in curricular strand in grades 5 through 12. So that's a beginning point of how I would proceed if this book, let's say, became there's a lot about the one book, one read. And some people object to that. They say, oh, we're being programmed. Well, one book, one read gives us common ground. It's a way that we can look at the same thing from different points of view. And it's a good starting point, because if we have common problems that we're discussing in the book, I believe that common problems can evolve into common solutions.
Yeah.
And so those are some of the curricular strands that I talk about, plus the idea of health and safety, and some of the things we've all heard awful things happening in our schools.
Yes.
And under the health and safety curriculum, you can find some ties here in terms of anti-bullying, and respect for different cultures, and it just goes on. So if you're looking, the main would be social studies. The main point would be reading and language arts. Another main point would be special social services, where we're talking about some of the problems that we've heard about from the schools. Those would be the main curricular points.
I just think it's so interesting. It's so important. There's so much division, to bring from a very young age, especially middle school. I think middle school is, I remember an educator once telling me that the middle school years are sort of like a make it or break it years for kids, you know, where they get tracked as far as how they head off into high school, and that there's an opportunity there for some children, for whatever reason, that could go either way, you know, that if with the right influences and guidance and support, you know, that you can make a major difference by intervening with the child at that particular point, you know, in their educational career there. So I mean, that thought of problem solving and coming together. I just, I really admire what you're doing with that, I guess is what I'm saying.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you. But yeah, middle school, you know, that's that time where professionally speaking, that's where a lot of school reform actually was focused on the middle school experience. And then speaking as a parent, you can see it when in your children where they start pulling away in so many ways to establish their own independence. So yeah, that's why I like these situations where, you know, they're captive, which can be at the kitchen table, can be when we're taking a car ride.
Yep.
And I always like to put in a lot of fun. The graphic novel was a way to look at serious kinds of manners, but in a way that was kind of like sugar coated, like you would give somebody you give a child medicine, you know, and it's got the sugar candy coating on the outside. That I try and use this motivational format, and I try to use humor in the different books. It's a good breakthrough, icebreaker, the idea of humor.
Let's call on Jeanette. Jeanette, your reaction to today's presentation?
Kathy always does a wonderful job on her presentations. I'm a big proponent of communicating with the children and talking to them. You have to let them know they're important. I've had some really interesting conversations with my great nephews. They tell you way more than you think you would really want to know. One with dinosaurs, and he knows all the names of all the dinosaurs. Now he's, I think, 8, but this was a few years ago. And I was teasing him. I said, oh, this dinosaur is going to get you. He said, Aunt Jeanette, this one is a vegetarian. It doesn't eat meat. So, I mean, they know so much, and you can't assume that they're stupid or that they don't have exposure to this, because they know way more than you think they do. So I'm a new grandma, so I'm trying to indoctrinate my 2-week-old granddaughter and talking, and she watches me when I'm talking, and she tries to copy the sounds. And I sat her down yesterday and showed her how that works. So I think it's good to sit with the kids and have discussions, share your stories. In our family, you never could leave the table without hearing somebody's story, and go for a walk with aunts and uncles, and they tell you stories. And I know I like to hear it. Sometimes you think, oh my God, not another story. But then in the end, it's something that you like, and you find yourself doing the same thing yourself later on. Years ago, you're telling all these people the same stories over and over again. You go, oh no, here she is again, the same story. But you know, it's interesting. I like to talk to the little kids and that one daughter, and it should be fun. Should be fun. It's important to teach them and let them know that it's not bad to know things. It's not an insult to know things.
Yeah.
You know what?
But anyway.
You know, Jeanette, when you were talking about, you know, you're always reading to your grandkids, you're always asking them to tell stories. And, you know, the thing of it is, when they see somebody like you, somebody that they look up to, that they're spending the time with, and you're reading the book or you're telling the story, they're thinking, must be important. So I should do that too. I should be reading. In other words, your example is saying so much more than just having the book in your hand or the story. You're really passing on much more than that in terms of teaching them. Congratulations on your grandchild, by the way.
Okay,
Okay.
anybody?
No,
else?
we were taught, so we like to do it, pass it on to somebody else.
You got it.
Sorry.
John Lag, you're out there. Got any
Okay.
comments or questions?
Of course.
Okay.
Dominic, good to see you, Dominic. Good. Thank you. Kathy, very good. Nice, good. Nice. You can see the passion again. You know, the voice in writing is like your voice. It's clearly, it personifies it, right? Quick question is like, do you write for the market or do you write for the story and find the market, if you will?
You know, I write for authenticity, and I do try. I try to expand what I think are important conversations, important stories for young people to know. You know, when I look at some of the programs, I think, how does something like this get on the air? I think there are ways to get points across that do not have to be so explicitly violent, explicitly in terms of sex. You know, I think I wonder about that. And so do I write for the market? Well, when I see what the market is, no, I write for the authenticity of what I'm trying to get across. And I use my author's voice to, you know, make clear comments about what I think is important. I do try and expand my market by, as I said to you, a lot of people have dogs. If I really was promoting this book, I probably would take 5 copies or 10 copies of the book and ask if I could put it in a pet shop of some kind, speak to a veterinarian about it. You know, I would say if I was promoting my book in that way, that's what I would be doing. And that's something that I haven't done enough of because I've done the other things.
Right.
Mostly it's me, one person that's doing all of these in connection with Fig Graphics, who does a lot, helps me a lot with the computer work and the graphics that I use.
What the, thank you. What was I going to say? The target market though would be 6th to 8th grade students, young adult type, I guess, middle school, I suppose you call it, right?
Right. And
Yeah,
also,
okay. Which is a void which is something of a void in good materials for that age group, I think, correct?
yes. And I try to approach some television stations and have them develop more materials for the grade 5 through 12 that kind of raises the idea of reading proficiency, the idea of really evaluating what you're seeing, creating different situations, but doesn't seem that people are that far along in that.
Okay.
Thank you.
Any other questions? If not, Kathy, 25 words to sum up what you had to say.
25 words. I think that America and the world is in need of people telling their stories, genuine stories about genuine people, heartwarming stories. And that if we get more stories like that out, then we will bring down barriers because people will realize that we're all in the same boat. We're all united. We have common problems. And I think that my books can open the door to that and have common solutions. I think I'm over 25, but
Well, thank you.
That's
very
Beautifully
much.
stated.
Good summation.
Beautifully stated, Kathy. Very nice.
Thank you very
Thank
much.
you. Bye-bye. Thanks
Thank
again.
you so much, Kathy.
Brava,
Thank you.
Kathy.
Ciao, Maria.
Presto.
Bye.
Bye, everybody.
Arrivederci. Goodbye.